Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the tier list that Marlon has made recently. He just won the most recent Rivals 2, not Coin Box, it was for the Hungry Box Subathon. I forget what he was calling the tournaments, but whatever. He ends up winning that one and he makes a tier list as a result of that. And it's a really interesting tier list and we're just going to be talking about it today, kind of getting in the mindset of the best Rivals 2 player in the world. And I know he didn't win Genesis. Maybe he's technically not the best, but I'm sure in the next couple months he will prove me right and my thumbnail will be correct. So first things first, use code ProofBlock. I forgot to mention that, but first things first, actually, if you look at the tiers, you have A tier, S minus tier, S tier, S plus tier. And I think this is really important to point out because all of the characters Rivals of Aether 2 are meta defining at this point. You can make every single one of them work. And I used to not think this was the case. I used to think that Etalus was not a character that you could make work, but I do think that after the most recent patch, he is good enough that you can make him work in a tournament. Now, you do have Marlon actually putting Etalus over Fleet, which I don't necessarily agree with. I still think that character's disadvantage is just so unbelievably garbage. Like, unless you have the super armor on your up B, you are just like never going to make it out of that disadvantage state. It is actually so tough as the Etalus player, but also Etalus's neutral is very strong now. Like, it was pretty solid before you were a race car, but now you're like an F1 race car. You're just sliding around the stage like it is nothing. And when you combine that with up B as a movement tool as well, you can immediately waveland out of it, either on the ground or on the platform. It starts popping people up in the air as well. You just have this really fast character that is extremely explosive and hits you incredibly hard. Etalus has one of the highest damage outputs in the game. Now that people have started to figure him out and they're getting very good at like kind of tech chasing people with those up throw resets, or not up throw, up air resets onto the ground using your dash attack to actually get value out of that, people are having insane damage outputs with this character. And with that buff, it's only gotten easier to do. So I still think that Fleet is a little bit better than Etalus, just because if Fleet gets hit, she still gets to play Rivals of Aether 2 afterwards, and also that character's edge guarding is still like super broken, but I don't think it's like a super crazy opinion to have Etalus over Fleet at this point. The character has gotten a lot better because of those buffs, and I wouldn't be surprised if you started to see a couple of them do pretty well in tournament. And the only other character in the A tier is going to be Kragg, and I think the placement of Kragg is fine, but I definitely think he should not be in the same tier as Fleet and Etalus. I do think that he is better than them, and the main thing that like kind of solidifies above them, in my opinion, is going to be his damage output and specifically securing the stock. I think Kragg might still be the best character in the game at securing that stock. It's a little bit tougher to say now because like Maple players have gotten a little bit competent, same thing with Raster players. But Kragg neutral special is just like the move. It is so unbelievably broken. Not only is it a command grab, which is like obviously just really strong to have, but it sets opponents up off stage into either Kragg's forward air or Kragg down air or Kragg like down B. It's like you're putting opponents into a horrible position where they then get followed up by Kragg's strongest kill moves, and then obviously he's got a strong attacks, which are insanely good at securing the stock. Down strong is still very good as just a call slamming your opponent's tech chasing as well. Kragg does a ton of damage. I think the reason that Marlon probably had Kragg in this A tier is his disadvantage state is pretty bad. People have figured out how to exploit this character. You know, you instantly break the pillar. Kragg doesn't really get the opportunity to set himself up off stage. He doesn't get the opportunity to pull a rock, which makes his recovery exponentially better. And then he's just forced to use his side B resource to either like ledge cancel off a platform, which definitely can be predictable because you obviously got to go towards the edge of the platform, or you get a ton of landing leg, go for the ledge, but obviously the ledge can be grabbed, and then you have to go over the ledge as Kragg, and then you have another landing leg with side B. Like, there's just no real solution for Kragg players. It feels like now that people have started to figure out their recovery. And also, I'm being very dramatic. I'm a Kragg player, so it hits a little bit close to home, but I think that's probably the reasoning of why Marlon has Kragg in the A tiers, because you can exploit this character extremely hard, especially if you know how to do so. But I do think that his damage output and easeability, not easeability, but I guess accessibility when it comes to getting the stock, I think should make him an S- character. On to that S-, and first things first, I don't think that Zetterberg should be an S- character. I would have him in the S tier, so we'll just talk about him when we get to the S tier. But I want to talk about actually Orcane first, because I was wrong about Orcane. The first time this has happened on the channel, at least to your knowledge, me being wrong, but this character's boxing is just so solid. And I know recently Nair has been nerfed, which definitely hurts the boxing, because that was like why the boxing was really good, but you also had a ton of other stuff get buffed as a response to that Nair nerf. So I don't know if Orcane's actually in like a better or worse spot right now, but I feel like they're probably in a better spot. And Orcane's boxing is just really good, even with that Nair nerf. And Orcane's killing is insane. Even just like only killing with back air, just using back air specifically as a kill tool, it is so easy to confirm into that move, and it kills insanely early. But you also have like sliding up smash with Orcane, which is super strong. Down smash is, or down strong is insanely good. It just comes out really fast, and they did nerf the kill power on it slightly, but it is still going to be hit fairly hard. I do think that Orcane bubbles aren't the best right now. They definitely could use a little bit of, not a buff necessarily, because like I don't think he needs a buff. The bubbles don't need to trap people better, but it just feels like right now that you don't always get a ton of value out of the bubbles. That's like the one thing about the character that's like maybe a little bit undermined, but his boxing is just like incredible. I do think that he gets beaten in terms of damage output a little bit by some of the characters in the S tier, in the S plus tier, and that's ultimately why I have him in this S minus tier. But Genesis and Marlon and Pluck just showed me that, oh my god, you could just press there with this character, and most of the cast can't do anything about it. And the final character I want to talk about in this S- tier is going to be Loxodon. Now, I think Loxodon is definitely an S- character. He is not on the same tier as Etalus and Fleet, but I don't think he's necessarily better than any of the characters that I would have in the S-. I do think he is towards the bottom of it, just slightly below Kragg. And my big problem with Loxodon as a character is his recovery is awful, except when he has Magma. And in my head, he wouldn't have Magma as much as he does, but he almost always has Magma. Like, there's so rare scenarios now where Loxodon is put off stage where he doesn't have at least one or two charges, and with those one or two charges, you should almost always be able to make it back to the stage because you just have this extra burst of movement that you can do in either direction, by the way. So if someone's coming at you off stage, you can Magma burst to the left and then side B back to the stage, so you can use the burst to avoid the option. You still have your movement tools. It was never like mobility was the problem for Loxodon. It was just really easy to intercept him when he is recovering, and with that addition of down B, intercepting just gets way, way harder off stage. So that's obviously a massive boon for the character, something that I definitely underrated. And Loxodon's walling is just like so strong. They did nerf his jab slightly, so it's going to be a little bit worse, but it's still an amazing jab. Up throw is still the war crime that it is. Until they change that move, Loxodon will never truly be a bad character. He just gets so much value out of it. And Loxodon's killing is also ridiculous. Like with the Magma charge, if you get hit by that like 60-70%, like full charge specifically, you are just going to die. His strong attacks now actually are strong attacks, and they cover a ton of space. Back air is a super strong move. Loxodon is a very, very strong character. I think kind of the narrative of Loxodon is bad. This character needs a ton of buffs. You can't make him work. No, you are bad. You can absolutely make Loxodon work, but this character still has a horrible disadvantage, god-awful disadvantage when he doesn't have Magma, and because of that, I do think that he should be beneath characters like Kragg, because even if you just call out Loxodon once off stage, especially now with the recent change they've made to the Magma, he loses that Magma, and then you're just put back in the scenario where you are absolutely going to die. So because his recovery is just so unbelievably awful, I do value characters like Kragg and Orcane above him, but also defensively and offensively, this character is a tank, so I can see where Marlon's coming from. Next up is going to be the S tier, and I think this is probably the best tier of the tier list, the one that I agree with the most. Like, maybe I would switch Claren and Forestburn around after those Claren nerfs, but honestly, aside from that, it's pretty good. The one big change that I would make is I would put Zetterburn towards the top of that S tier. Let's talk about Zetterburn now, because there was two really interesting things Marlon said about him in the tier list video. The first thing is that he said that Zetterburn and Kragg are the best tournament characters, and I think this is just like objectively true. Like if you look at results, they're super popular, but also not to hit the ceiling with them, but to hit like very, very high peaks with Kragg and Zetterburn, you need to execute way less than you would with a character like Maple, a character like Raptor, even a character like Claren, where you actually need to space everything. Editing ProofBlock, I want to make it really, really clear that the point there is not that Claren is hard. Please do not let that be your takeaway. She's very easy. Like, it is so easy for Maple or for Kragg and Zetterburn to get their really, really good combos in tournament. And then the second big point that you had him making about Zetterburn is that he thought the character's disadvantage state was really bad, specifically the recovery, and that defensive counterplay against Zetterburn is just like underdeveloped. But there's a lot of stuff that you can do against him that people just aren't, and when they do, he'll be a lot worse. And I think those are both true. Like, those are just objectively true things. His recovery is absolutely horrible. People just aren't really great at exploiting the timing on side B or down B, but they will get better at that. And then I also think that defensive counterplay against Zetterburn isn't super great. People don't really crouch cancel against him, which you should be. Like, crouch canceling is so important against this character. But I also think that, like, you do 40% off of any move that you hit as Zetterburn. So if you don't crouch cancel my down tilt, my up tilt, my shine, my down air, you are going to go through the ringer, because I'm going to up air you over and over and over again, and then I can end it with a forward air off stage, or I can down air you and force a tech chase where we get to get that going again. So unless Marlon is like specifically referring to just like DIing away from these Zetterburn combos to actually escape it, so he can't get that down air follow up, or he can't get that sweet spot forward air, then I don't agree with what he's saying. I think that Zetterburn just has so much damage, and he does it so often with literally everything that he does, and also confirms kills with literally everything that he does. Like back air, shine are going to apply fire, then all of your strong attacks are going to be really good. You can go for the edge guarding with forward air or with down air. I guess not everything, but his strong attacks are just so amazing that it feels like everything. I just think Zetter is too good at getting the stock and way too good at dealing damage with literally every single thing that he does, that until I actually see this defensive counterplay, specifically defensive counterplay that is like DIing out of combos, just not allowing him to set up certain routes, I'm just not going to believe it. Also, really quickly, I wanted to point out that Zetter's grab is really, really strong as well, and it also kind of invalidates crouch canceling as the main mechanic that you use against him. So I'm just really curious what Marlon meant by defensive options. Like, I'm sure he had specific things in mind, certain routes or combo starters that you can avoid, but I just don't know. And finally, we have the S plus tier. And this is probably the part of the tier list that I agree with the most. I do think that Maple is the best character in the game, not only because the in-practice stuff is super good, she's just a really nimble character that can do a ton of damage, but the theory stuff for Maple is like by far the strongest in the game, in my opinion. Now, for who the second best character in the game is, I used to think it was pretty convincingly Raster, but after the most recent Raster changes, I do think it's up in the air between him and Ranno. I do think that these characters are the S plus tier characters. They are better than the rest of the cast. They should not be in a tier with anyone else. And Ranno, I think maybe the reason that Marlon has him as the best character in the game over characters like Maple and Raster is because it's a lot easier to do the crazy Ranno stuff than it is to do the crazy Maple and Raster stuff. And I also think that the movement of Ranno is the best in the game when fully optimized. You're just such an overwhelming character using B reversing needles, B reversing after side B especially. You have so much momentum. They're just normally running around up tilt as well. Like pivot up tilt just does like so much coverage. It's actually insane. Like you just have so much variety, so much burst potential as Ranno that you're an absolute demon in the neutral. Now, your recovery is going to be a little bit of a weak aspect, but in contrast to the rest of the characters in this game, it is towards the higher half of the cast, I would say. So it's not like you're absolutely abysmal off stage. It is still an area where you have to be careful, but it's an area where you do have, again, variety as the Ranno player. I think that's the really big benefit of playing Ranno, is he almost has like 2 or 3 options for every single scenario that you are going to put him in, like Nair, forward air, back air. These moves are just universally like good moves to use in a lot of situations. And by hitting them at pretty much any percent, any hitbox, honestly, you're going to be able to get a decent follow-up. So I think the versatility of Ranno can definitely justify him for being the best character in the game, but the theory aspect of Maple is always going to make it, so I just put him above, or put her above Ranno. I think I'll probably always think Maple's the best character in the game until she actually gets changed or someone gets buffed massively, someone else gets added. But Ranno's second best, you know, I could get behind that. So, TLDR, is the Marlon tier list good? Yes, I think the Marlon tier list is very good. There's a couple character placements, mainly just the Zetter placement, that I don't agree with, but the point that it's getting across, I think, is very important, and I think it's a point that a lot of people in the Rivals 2 community need to hear, and that is that every single character in this game is viable. Maybe you can't top 8 a major with Etalus, but honestly, after those dash attack changes and the up B changes as well, you might be able to. I shouldn't sell that character too short. So you can make every single character work in Rivals, and the difference between the 9th best character in the game and even like the 4th best character in the game is very, very small. Almost like not even noticeable. So yeah, Zetterberg might be an 8 on this tier list, but there's like a very, very small gap between him and even the characters, honestly, in the S plus tier, even though I do think there is a gap between S plus tier characters and the rest of the cast. So that should be your main takeaway from a tier list like this. Every character is viable. Some characters a little bit more viable than others, but the differences between them, how high they are on a tier list, it doesn't really matter. They're all very good. They're all within a close range of each other. Just because a character is perceived as the 8th worst character on a tier list doesn't mean that the person actually thinks that character is bad. They could think that character is insanely broken, but relative to the rest of the cast, they just think other characters are better. So with that all in mind, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this sport. It's been absolutely unreal. Again, check out Marlon and Hungrybox as well for the stream if you didn't watch it. Their links will be down below. Be sure to check them out. And with that, I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.